Pro Football Hall of Famer and San Francisco 49er legend, Super Bowl champion Ronnie
How you doing,
Lott.
kid?
Good to see you, Ronnie.
Great seeing you.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
How about the Super Bowl here in San
It's
Francisco
awesome,
and Santa
man.
Clara?
This is amazing. 3 years ago, they were trying to get it here. Now it's here. And I think what's fascinating to me is that everybody around the Bay Area, Oakland, Monterey, everyone has embraced the Super Bowl. And the other thing that's really fascinating to me is that 3 years ago, we came up with this idea that we want this to be the most giving Super Bowl. We'll give 13 million away. And so we're giving $13 million to nonprofits throughout the Bay Area. So, yeah, great Super Bowl for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and here we are in San Francisco with the stadium all the way down there in Santa Clara. What do you think about the Niners experience that's being given to the fans here in Northern California?
Well, first of all, I mean, look, Candlestick was Candlestick. It had a lot of great memories. It had a lot of great elements. But I live down there. I live in Cupertino. I live about 10 minutes from the stadium. I like the stadium. I like hot weather. I like playing in warm weather.
How cold was it playing in Candlestick?
Candlestick could be challenging. And the reason it was challenging is that the water table, if there was a rainy day, the field could be wet. And the field could not only be wet, but you're like, well, why is the field wet? Because the rain hasn't been a part of it for, a couple of days. And so all of a sudden you walk out there and it's still wet. And so it would retain water. And it made it challenging for some days, but it was also a way for us to be able to say, you know what, this is a competitive advantage because we know about it. And some games it was a competitive advantage.
Ronnie Lott joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Who was the most competitive teammate? Who was the one?
Jerry Rice.
That's it, right?
Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice.
Even more than Joe? Even more than Joe? Even more than anybody else?
You got to remember, when you play against a person who every day said that I got to have my best day, and I got to be at my best every day. He was like the Michael Jordan, the guy that was grinding people in practice. He was that kind of guy, and he was more competitive than Joe in practice. But when it came time to play a game, Joe was probably the most competitive person I've ever played against. I played against him at Notre Dame, didn't like him there, and didn't necessarily like him in practice. But he was a great teammate, probably the best teammate, because he had a way of being so friendly and so welcoming. To be as good as he is, he could have been, he could have said, you know what, I'm going to be a standoff guy. He was the one guy that was playing jokes on everybody. He was the guy that would hide George Seifert bike. He just had a great way of just being.
What do you mean he'd hide George Seifert's bike? What do you mean?
Well, at training camp, he would take George Seifert's bike. George would ride around his bike through the campus of Sierra College up in Sacramento.
Yes.
And Joe would go steal his bike, and he would put his bike up in a tree. and that was, but for Joe, that was just one of many, things that Joe would do to a lot of people throughout a training camp and throughout his career. He just enjoyed having fun.
Well, I think send Seifert up into a tree, because Eric Davis was on the show on Monday and said he's the most superstitious guy he's ever been around. That they had to fly out of the same gate every single time, same flight attendants, same everything every single time.
He did. He was very superstitious. He was my defensive back coach my rookie year. So I've known George for a long time.
Right.
And a lot of who I am is because of George.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, you're a Pro Football Hall of Famer, Ronnie.
Well, and I will say that he earned a button on there. He earned a part of that jacket because there were so many things that he taught us early on in the game of football. Our secondary, we had a phenomenal group of guys: Eric Wright, Carlton Williamson, Dwight Hicks. In '84, we all go to the Pro Bowl together, and I think a lot of that was attributed to how he coached us.
I got Ronnie Lott here to kick off the Wednesday edition of the Rich Eisen Show at Super Bowl 50 in the Bay Area, right here live on the set. Let's talk about the here and now, Ronnie. The current quarterback, we assume, is Colin Kaepernick of the 49ers, and there was a report yesterday out of New York City that he wants out of San Francisco and love to play for the Jets. What do you think about that?
Hey, man, the one thing that I do know about him, and let me go on record and say this, is that the one thing I know about him, he's a good kid. And the reason I say that is that I met him a couple years ago before he was a starter and had the opportunity to sit and to realize that he's a good kid. What I do know with football today and the media and what happens is sometimes you can get lost. I hope he gets back to being a kid that's hungry, a kid that really is passionate about wanting to be great. The kid that I saw early on, the kid that I met, the kid that I just bumped into about four or 5 weeks ago with his dad, he's a good kid. And so for me, I think he's a type of kid that would welcome anywhere to play the game of football. Right now, I think one of the things that happened to him, and I think one of the things that he's going through right now, it's an emotional time in his life. It's a very emotional time in his life because there are a lot of things that happened this past year that were emotional. He getting hurt, going through some of the challenges that he went through. He's in an emotional situation. So he's going to say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, if you said, Ronnie, could I win with him? I could win with him.
And Chip Kelly, it seems like he'd be perfect for that offense. Or are we making an assumption that you don't agree with there?
I think that he could be fantastic with Chip. And I think that both of them, but the question that I've always said, and Bobby Knight, for all of the things that people would say about Bobby Knight, everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. For all the things that people would say about Bill Walsh, because Bill could be a little tough on you, everybody loved him. For all the things they're saying about Chip Kelly right now is that Colin has got to figure out, will he love him? And a lot of times you can find moments where people will say, you know what, this marriage is not going to work. And in sports, it happens a lot. It happens a lot. And I tell you, what's tough for me is that, Chip Kelly, in the things that we've seen so far and in the things that we've heard so far, everybody's trying to figure out who is the real Chip Kelly, because when he was at Oregon, he was a certain way. When he came to Philly, he definitely was a certain way, and now he's here. And I think that if you said Oregon and Philly, and you really look at the personalities of those situations, right now, Colin's probably sitting there going, who am I going to get? Am I going to get the guy that was at Oregon, or am I going to get the guy that was at Philly?
Well, Marshall Faulk says over and over again that he's waiting for one player to come out and say, I love Chip. One player that used to play for Chip to say, you know what, I know he's getting worked over a bit because he didn't win in Philadelphia, but I love Chip. There's not a large legion of players to be doing that right now.
I think one of the challenges is that in sports, you could be dynamic and you could have all the capabilities like he does have of being able to be dynamic with the offense. But in life, man, people respond to people, and they respond to leaders, and they respond to the way you work with them. And I remember Bill Walsh would sit there and he would talk to me about certain issues about life, and you would realize that Bill had some depth to him. He had more than just an offense. He had some soul to him. And so you could sit there and realize that, man, he was architecting all of us to be better. Chip Kelly has to architect people to be better, not just on the football field, but within.
It sounds, Ronnie Lott, before we get to your next VR, that you have this your virtual reality headset sitting here on the desk. You're a little bit of a skeptic with Chip Kelly right now.
No, what I am is that I'm a person that's a realist, and the realist tells me that at Oregon he did this, and he did some really cool things. With Philly, he did some things that McCoy and Jackson, and I know, if you had those two guys, a lot of people would say you can win a lot of football games in that offense, And they did, by the way. And so they did. So what's interesting to me is that what happened with how he dealt with those people, how he dealt with the wide receiver, how he dealt with some of the other folks that he dealt with. And I don't know. That's the hard part is I don't know, but it's allowed me now to have doubt. It's allowed me now to be able to sit here and to contemplate on it because of the fact that you got other players and other people around the league have contemplated on it. It's not my fault, but it's it's really his world to be able to go out and say, you know what, I can fix this. I think Chip Kelly, by the way, is going to fix it.
Okay.
And by the way, I think Chip Kelly is going to be a guy that's going to be dynamic. I think he's going to understand that I can surrender my personality.
Well, let's hit on this thing. What is this next VR headset that I've just put back down on the desk, Ronnie?
Well, first of all, imagine thinking of the game where all of a sudden I hit you. Mm-hmm. And you said, well, Ronnie, you can't hit me that hard. Well, in this case, you could actually be in the game and you could put this on and you could not only put it on, but you could say, well, you know what? I could literally feel the hit because you could be that close to it. So they did it with the Pelicans against the Warriors.
Yeah, I put it on before, and it's like I'm sitting courtside to a Pelicans-Warriors game.
And as you know, when you're
Unbelievable.
when you're sitting courtside, and you're sitting there, and Steph Curry runs by, and he does this right here after he makes his three-pointer, and then he does this, right? And so, don't you want that experience as a fan?
Sure.
And I think one of the great things is that this content that they'll be able to take through this mechanism is going to allow all of us to be able to get closer to it, to not only be closer to it, but to be able to feel it. And as you know, as a fan, the one thing that we do want is we want to be right near it. We want to be so close to it. That's why we have you.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we have
well,
you.
I'm real, though. I mean, I'm right here sitting right here in front of you.
You get to express all of what it is, all of what the game's about, and I think that Next VR is going to be able to do that through their content platform.
At nextvr.com, find out more about the history and the technology that gives you the best seat in the house. Good to see you.
Great seeing
Ronnie
you, man.
Lott.
Thank
you are
very
the
much.
man.
No, you're the man.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. That's Ronnie.
Take
the Rich Eisen Show mug.
And are you running?
Yes, on the mug and in 3 weeks of the combine. But please take a seat. You don't have to run off the
I don't
set.
have to leave.
I'm just throwing a break. Ronnie Lott's actually like getting up and going.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.